Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this year's national observance of the Philippine Veterans Week and the 80th anniversary of the Araw ng Kagitingan. Today, we will witness the virtual commemoration of the tribute to all Filipino heroes traditionally observed at the historic Corregidor Island to honor all Filipino heroes, patriots, martyrs, and defenders who fought and died for the country's freedom and liberty, from the time of Lapu-Lapu to the Philippine Revolution against Spain, Filipino-American War, and the World War II. It also honors Filipino defenders who fought in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, veterans of military campaigns, members of humanitarian contingents to other countries, and our modern-day veterans who render honorable military service in defending the country in times of war or peace, and in faithfully upholding their duty to preserve our sovereignty and national security. This virtual commemoration will commence with a wreath-laying ceremony to honor all Filipino heroes.
Kalipunan, dala, kalis. Tanghal! Ha! Mga pinunot Kalipunan, tanghal. Ha! Mga pinunot Kalipunan, baba. Ha! Dala, kalis. Baba! Ha! Ginoo, dana po ang pag-aalay. Kalipunan, kanan, hap, tulong, kat. Better. Put. Alright. Mike. Tanghal! Ha! Mga pinulong at Kalipunan, tanghal! Ha! Order! Aim! Mga pinuno at kalipunan, baba! Ha! Da! Dala! Baba! Ha! Ready? Kaliwa. Stop. Low. Cut. Tanghal! Ha! Mga pinunod kalipunan, tanghal! Ha! Kalipunan, baba! Ha! Da! Dala! Kalis! Baba! Ha! Pino, tapos na po ang pag-aalay. Lipunan, baba, kalis.
To welcome us on this commemorative event, here is Governor Juanito Victor C. Remulla Jr. from Provincial Government of Cavite.
Magandang umaga. Ako po si Governor John Vic Remulla na bumabati sa lahat ng ating mga veterans sa araw ng Kagitian. Alam ko marami ng taon nang nagdaan, pero hindi namin kayo nakakalimutan. Sa lahat ng nagaruga, nagsakripisyo, lumaban, nagtanggol para sa ating bansa. Mabuhay kayo, mabuhay ang veterans, at good luck sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Governor Remulla. Now here to render his tribute message for all Filipino heroes is Samuel Nash Irapinian from the Florentino Hoya Elementary School.
Sa mga iginagalang na mga veterano at mga panauhin, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Isa pang malaking karangalan na makadalo sa mahalagang pagdiriwang na ito. Isa itong pambihirang pagkakataon na hindi na ibibigay sa lahat ng bataang tulad ko. Ngayon, pinagdiriwang natin ang iwalumpuna paggunita sa bayanihan ng mga sundalong Pilipino na buong gigit na nagpaglaban sa para sa ngapon noong ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig. Sa bisa ng proklamasyon bilang 66 dinagdaanan ng dating Pangulong Corazon Aquino. Kinikilala ang araw na ito bilang araw ng kagitingan. Atin pong gulitiin ang ilan sa mga pangyayari sa buhagang ito ng kasaysayan. Noong 9 ng Abril, taong 1942, isinatinig ni 3rd Lieutenant Normando de Ponce Reyes ang mensaheng sinulat ni Kapitan Salvador P. Lopez mula sa sekretong istasyon ng radyo ng Voice of Freedom sa Maligtahan Tunnel. Ito po ang bahagi ng mensahe mula kay Kapitan Lopez. Bataan has fallen. The Philippine-American troops on this war, ravaged, and blood-stained peninsula have laid down their arms. With heads bloody but unbowed, they have yielded to the superior force and numbers of the enemy. Bataan has fallen. Ang mga katagang nagpahayag sa mundo ng pagsubok ng mga sundalong Pilipino at Amerikano sa pangunguna ni Major General Edward King, taas mong isinuko ng mga sundalong Pilipino ang kanilang mga armas bilang pagtanggap sa higit na malakas na pwersa ng kalaban. Sa pagsubok ito, tanging hiling ni General King ay ang maayos na pagtrato sa mga bihag ng digmaan o prisoners of war na siyang nakasaad sa Geneva Convention. Ngunit, gaya ng ating napag-aralan sa bahaging ito ng kasaysayan, kabaliktaran ng kahilingan ni Major General King ang naranasan ng mga sumukong sundalong Pilipino at Amerikano. 75,000 sundalo ang pinaglakad ng 66 na milya mula Maribeles, Bataan patungong San Fernando, Pampanga. Dito ay sinakay naman sila sa siksikan at maduming tren patungong Capas, Tarlac. Mula dito, muling naglakad ng 7 milya ang mga bihag ng digmaan patungong huling istasyon sa Camp O'Donnell. Maraming kwento na tayong nabasa at napakinggan kung paano tiniis ng mga sundalo ang paghampas ng mga baril sa kanilang katawan. Hindi maaaring nagpakita ng paghihina. Hindi maaaring indahin ang sakit at
And now here to give his special message is Lieutenant Colonel Ramon Demi Zagala, descendant of a veteran from the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor.
Remembering April 9, 1942 and the Death March. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the surrender of Bataan. This is an event worthy of commemoration because when the news spread of the capitulation of Bataan, the entire Philippines was affected. When we hear of April 9, what comes to mind is the fall of Bataan and subsequent Death March. But what is not remembered is the heroic campaign to defend the strategic peninsula against all odds. The USAFE forces in Bataan technically outnumbered the Japanese invaders besieging the front, but the Japanese could choose where to strike, whereas the USAFE had to spread its lines thin to cover the entire peninsula. Thus, at any given point of the Japanese choosing, the Japanese outnumbered the defenders. Furthermore, the Japanese had access to food and supplies, while the defenders of Bataan had to make do with very limited stocks. These stocks had to be shared with around 20,000 civilians, Bataan residents, refugees from Manila and Central Luzon. What was remarkable was that the defense forces held on as long as they did, with very little food and medicine. Some of the defenders' weapons were defective, being World War I surpluses. Majority of the defenders were reservists who had very little training, and yet they managed to hold out for so long, and defeating the Japanese in several significant battles. They held on even as other more strongly defended positions in Southeast Asia fell. The Japanese had been reinforced. They had naval and air superiority. The men in the front line had been on the alert and fighting since early January, 3 months of being on constant guard. When the Japanese launched their final offensive on Good Friday, 1942, the men were tired, they were hungry, they were weak. They could have fought further, but the Japanese onslaught involved bombardment from the air and from heavy artillery miles in the rear. The Japanese had tanks, the defenders had virtually nothing left. The Japanese who surged forward were fresh troops from Singapore, from Japan, and from China. The front lines, which were pounded from the air and the ground, inevitably gave way. The men were exhausted, but tried to put up defensive lines where they could. General Edward King realized that he had no choice but to surrender if the lives of the defenders were to be saved. And so General King, on his own initiative, decided to meet the Japanese. In the negotiations for a ceasefire, General King stressed the importance of guaranteeing the safety of his men. The Japanese officer who he spoke with promised that the men would be well treated. What happened in the next few days proved the opposite. The Death March involved marching the defenders of Bataan, Filipinos and Americans in separate lines, out of Bataan into a prisoner of war camp in Camp O'Donnell in Capas, Tarlac. Between 60,000 to 80,000 Filipinos and Americans marched 113 kilometers from the starting points at Mariveles and Bagak to the camp. The march was broken by brief breaks for rest and a few overnight stops. We have heard of the Japanese cruelties inflicted on the prisoners of war, bayoneting those who could not keep up with the march, preventing the prisoners from drinking even the murky water by the roadside. The whole country felt the pain and the suffering. The Philippine Army divisions consisted of men from Luzon, from the Visayas, as well as a few from Mindanao. The march was thus a national tragedy.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Zagala. And here is another message from the Chief Operating Officer of TIEZA, Mr. Mark P. Lapi.
As we observe as a nation the Day of Valor and the Philippine Veterans Week, the Tourism Infrastructure and Enterprise Zone Authority honors all Filipinos who fought and sacrificed their lives for our independence. On the 80th Day of Valor, let us look back on their heroism and continue to strive to emulate their patriotism in our everyday lives. TIEZA works hand in hand with the Department of Tourism and the Philippine Veteran Affairs Office to show our gratitude for our war veterans, to develop and preserve the military shrines, including the Mount Samat Shrine of Valor and the Corregidor National Shrine. It is our way of honoring their sacrifices and commitment to our nation. We hope that their bravery and resiliency will continue to inspire us to work together to uphold the ideals of our democracy. May we all have a meaningful commemoration of the Araw ng Kagitingan. Mabuhay ang ating mga veterano. Mabuhay ang ating mga bayani. We want to thank the Department of National Defense, Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, and the local government of Cavite for your active engagement, guidance, and support throughout the process of the strategic plan's development. Together with the stakeholders of the National Shrine, the PVAO, the Department of Tourism, we will revitalize the tourism on the island and show the importance of our history to the international community. Mabuhay ang ating mga veterano.
Next to give a message is the Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, Vice Admiral Artemio M. Abu.
Isang magiting na pagbati mula sa makabago at masiglang Coast Guard. Bilang komandante ng Philippine Coast Guard, kaisa ninyo kami sa paggunita ng ika-80 araw ng Kagitingan at Philippine Veterans Week at sa patuloy na pagbibigay pugay sa katapangan ng mga Pilipinong nakipaglaban at nagbuwis ng buhay para sa ating bayan. Sa ating paggunita, kaakibat nito ang ating naisin na may sulong, mapanatili at alalahanin ang mga prinsipyo, ideolohiya at kabayanihan ng mga veteranong Pilipino upang mapalaganap ang patriotismo at pagmamahal sa bayan, higit lalo ng mga kabataan. Gunitain natin ng may galak ang mga hamon at tagumpay ng nakaraan upang patuloy na mapaglingkuran ang ating bayan. Ang inyong tanod baybayin ng Pilipinas ay buong pusong maglalayag at magseserbisyo upang mapangalagaan ang kapayapaan na ipinaglaban ang ating mga bayani at mapanatili ang kasarinlan ng bansang Pilipinas. Taos puso ang aming pasasalamat sa ating mga veterano, maging sa kanilang mga pamilya na sumuporta at patuloy na nagdadala ng kanilang dangal. Hanggang sa kasalukuyan, ang pagpapahalaga ng bawat Pilipino sa pamilya ay nagsisilbing inspirasyon ng inyong lingkod bayan na mapagpursige upang ang sunod na salinlahi ay patuloy na maranasan ang ating tinatamasang demokrasya. Saludo kami sa lahat ng bayani at veteranong Pilipino na nagbuwis ng buhay para sa kabutihan ng mga susunod na henerasyon. Sa ating mga kabataan, kayo ang magiging veterano ng ating kinabukasan. Dalhin ninyo ng may dangal ang lahing Pilipino. Baunin ninyo ang tapang at pagpupunyagi para sa inang bayan ng higit sa sariling kapakinabangan. Sa mga aktibidad na nakalatag, magsilbi nawa ang mga itong bagong alaala na babaunin ng bagong henerasyon ng mga bayani Asahan po ninyo ang aming pakikisa sa adhikaing mapalaganap ang tunay na pagmamahal sa bayan. Nandito po ang Philippine Coast Guard na handang pangalagaan ang ating karagatan at gampanan ang mga nakaatang na tungkulin na mapanatiling payapa, ligtas at malinis ang ating karagatan. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Vice Admiral Abu. Also here with us to give his special message is the Flag Officer in Command, Vice Admiral Adeluis Bordado.
Malugod na nakikilahok ang hukbong dagat ng Pilipinas sa pagdiriwang ng ika-80 taon paggunita sa anibersaryo ng Araw ng Kagitingan at sa pambansang pagdiriwang ng Philippine Veterans Week. Nakikibahagi kami sa pag-alaala at pagkilala sa kabayanihan, sakripisyo at karangalang ibinigay ng ating mga veterano para sa kalayaan ng Pilipinas. If there is one principal value that our living heroes like you, our Filipino war veterans, taught us, soldiers of today, it is this, that while every generation fight their own battles, Filipino warriors continue to be as resilient and as tenacious as their forefathers. At the fall of Bataan, our war veterans magnanimously sacrificed blood, health, and lives so that future generations of Filipino will be stronger enough and smarter enough to govern on our own and fight our own battles of today. The motivation in the sheer bravery to abandon comforts and family to fight for the resistance remain as steering reminders that the struggle for freedom and independence from foreign invaders are tremendously growing and complex. In perpetuity, your armed forces of the Philippines and the Filipino people remain indebted to our war heroes because you inspire us to be more committed defense force that is capable of protecting our maritime nation's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Again, on behalf of the entire Philippine Navy, the sailors, Marines, reservists, and civilian human resources, I express my deep admiration and respect to the brave veterans who inspired and continue to inspire generations of Filipino. Likewise, rest assured that we will nurture nationalism and patriotism within our ranks, values which our war veterans have preserved through the years. Just like you, our gallant heroes, we will remain steadfast in the performance of our duties and responsibilities para sa Pilipino at para sa bayan. Taos-puso po kaming nagpapasalamat sa inyong serbisyo, katapangan at inspirasyon. Mabuhay po kayong lahat. Maraming salamat. Our snappy salute.
Thank you very much, sir. Let us also welcome the Minister, Counselor, and Deputy Chief of Mission of the U.S. Embassy to the Philippines, Chargé d'Affaires Heather Catherine Variava, for her special message.
Good morning. It is my honor to speak with you today alongside DOT Secretary Bernadette Romalo Puyat, DND Undersecretary Ernesto Carolina, DENR Acting Secretary Jim Sampulna, Philippine Navy Vice Admiral Adelius Bordado, Philippine Coast Guard Vice Admiral Artemio Abu, Cavite Governor John Vic Remulla, TIEZA CEO Mark Lapid, and spokesperson for the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant Colonel Ramon Zagala. It is a privilege to join Filipino veterans and their family members during Philippine Veterans Week as we honor the legacy and sacrifice of the brave men and women who have fought for freedom. The legacy of the thousands of U.S. and Philippine veterans who fought side by side during World War II forged an unbreakable bond between our nations and people that continues today. The alliance we established following World War II continues to unite and inspire generations of Filipinos and Americans. In fact, this month, thousands of American and Filipino service members are working shoulder to shoulder in combined exercise Balikatan to continue building trust and partnership between our militaries. As we recognize and honor Philippine veterans this week, it is also important to acknowledge the courage of the soldiers and civilians in Ukraine who are fighting for the same principles of freedom and democracy that underpin our alliance here. The United States and the Philippines have voted together at the United Nations to condemn the unprovoked Russian aggression, and the United States stands with Ukraine. We stand united with our ally, the Philippines, and this year we mark the 75th anniversary of our diplomatic relationship. As friends, partners, and allies, the story of our cooperations through the decades makes us proud. Our countries have accomplished great things together, and I am optimistic that in 2022 we will accomplish even more thanks to the friendship, cooperation, and mutual support between Americans and Filipinos. Reflecting on our shared history and sacrifice at events like this deepens my faith in the continued promise of the U.S.-Philippine relationship. I am confident that we will accomplish even more together in the years and decades to come. Thank you for your service, and I wish you a happy Veterans Week, Philippines. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Chargé d'Affaires Variava. Up next is the special message from the Secretary of the Department of Tourism, Honorable Bernadette Romulo Puyat.
Magandang umaga at maligayang araw ng kagitingan sa ating lahat. Today, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the fall of Bataan. We honor all Filipino veterans and heroes on this day of valor. And we remember the bravery, the courage, and the indomitable spirit of our ancestors in the face of suffering and oppression in the hands of despair and defeat. On April 3, 1942, Filipino soldiers numbering at least 60,000 fought for their lives and for the country's freedom when the Japanese forces relentlessly bombarded Bataan for 3 days. These 3 days happened to be the holy days of Good Friday, Black Saturday, and Easter Sunday, a weekend that Christians normally begin in contemplation and fasting and end in joyful renewal. The choice to attack on April 3 was also highly symbolic for the Japanese, as it marked the death anniversary of their first emperor, and in Japan, it was a day spent fasting and making offerings. For both sides, but for Christians especially, it was a Friday that signified duty and sacrifice. There was no greater duty for Filipinos than to defend one's nation And there was no greater sacrifice than what our troops gave in the name of freedom. On April 9, the day of the surrender, the radio broadcast, The Voice of Freedom, delivered the unforgettable line. Bataan has fallen, but the spirit that made it stand, a beacon to all the liberty-loving peoples of the world, cannot fall. This was written by Captain Salvador Lopez and recorded by 3rd Lieutenant Normando Reyes from the Malinta Tunnel in Corregidor, which would fall a month later. The speech took on the solemnity of a sermon with a stirring reminder of the meaning of Easter Sunday, a promise of resurrection and victory. Filipinos back then held up their unwavering faith like a lamp that would shine light on the darkest of hours. The past 2 years that we have endured the pandemic has been the most trying times that the present generations has ever encountered. The battle lines are our bodies, the enemy, an invisible virus, whose only mission is to hijack our cells and replicate. More than 6 million people have died as a result of COVID around the world, and we have spent the last 2 years living in a state of fear. But Filipinos continue to show how they embody the message of Easter by showing others what compassion looks like and by living a life of love and solidarity. We hail our frontliners and healthcare workers as heroes of the pandemic for their commitment to duty despite the risks to their own health. We honor those ordinary citizens who pull together whatever resources they have to help and heal those in need in the spirit of bayanihan. Our endurance and our patience have paid off. The valor that Filipinos displayed as we battled the pandemic has seen us through to a new dawn. We are opening up to the world, rolling away that heavy rock that has enclosed us for too long. May we have the courage to begin anew, realizing that life is meant to be lived in God's glory. May we continue to shine our light for everyone to see, and may the Philippines be an everlasting beacon of freedom and peace. Mabuhay ang bayaning Pilipino.
Thank you very much for your message, Secretary Romulo Puyat. This time around, let us all welcome the Administrator of the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, Undersecretary Ernesto G. Carolina, for his message and introduction of our guest of honor and speaker.
May I greet our special guest for today's auspicious event. I'd like to greet the Secretary of Tourism, Secretary Berna Puyat, also the Chief Operating Officer of CHESA, Mr. Mark Lapid. May I greet also the Flag Officer in Command of the Philippine Navy, Admiral Bordado, and the Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, Admiral Artemio Abu. I wish to acknowledge the U.S. Sergey, the Affairs, Heather Catherine Variaba, and may I greet Lieutenant Colonel Demi Sagala of the Defenders of Bataan and Corregidor, and of course our gracious host, the Governor of the Province of Cavite, Governor Juanito Victor Remulla Jr. To our veterans and their loved ones, ladies and gentlemen, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. For this year's tribute to all Filipino heroes, it is my pleasure to introduce a humble and hardworking man for our guest of honor today. He is a homegrown executive of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Having started as a tree marker in the Bureau of Forest Development in 1977, and in less than 2 years, he was promoted to budget examiner after he graduated as a government scholar from the Notre Dame University with a bachelor's degree in commerce. With his dedication to public service and evident skills and potentials as a leader, he became Chief Regional Development Specialist of the DENR Region 12 in 1988 and continued to work his way up until he became Regional Executive Director in 2009 and Regional Director in 2013. In January 2019, he was appointed as Officer in Charge, Assistant Secretary for Field Operations in Western Mindanao, and Undersecretary for Enforcement and Special Projects in October of the same year. In 2020 until 2021, he handled various units and assignments as Undersecretary of the DNR, including enforcement, operations, mining, and Muslim affairs. His fieldwork took him all over the Philippines, from Region 1 in Luzon, Region 6 in the Visayas, and Regions 11, 12, and the Caraga in Mindanao. His continued success in the field is backed up by his persistence in learning and development. Aside from his bachelor's degree in commerce, he also obtained Bachelor of Laws from the Notre Dame University in 1983, a master's degree in professional studies, major in public affairs management from the University of Southern Mindanao in 1994, and Master of Science degree in Business Administration from the Agusan Colleges in 2002. Finally, he finished his PhD in Management from the University of Visayas in 2012. He also earned the rank of Career Executive Service Officer 1, the highest CESO level in 2021. With his rich experience, productivity, and rapport with his colleagues and subordinates in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, his designation as the Acting Secretary of the DENR is a well-deserved achievement and recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed privileged to present to you our guest of honor and speaker in today's tribute to all Filipino heroes. Please join me in welcoming Acting Secretary Jim Oliveros Sampulna of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources.
Honorable Delphine Florisana, sir, the Secretary of the Department of National Defense, the Minister, Counselor, and Chief Deputy Mission to the Philippines, the Regional Director of the U.S. Veterans Affairs, the members of the DND family, and of course, the PIBO Administrator, Yossi Ernesto G. Carolina, selected officer of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Filipino Veterans, and leaders, PIBO partners, stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, isang makakalikasang araw po sa inyong lahat. It is an extreme pride and privilege to receive the much-awaited patriotic honor, the posthumous U.S. Congressional Gold Medal Award, in behalf of our dear father, Technical Sergeant Kadil T. Sampulna, USAP, who had willingly put his life for his country and the United States of America. As we celebrate the Araw ng Kagitingan this award is a representation of the bravery and great courage of the Filipinos to defend our democracy in this part of the region. It is my pride and honor that my father is one of the awardees of this year's U.S. Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian award in the United States granted to a Filipino veteran of World War II. On behalf of my family, we thank wholeheartedly the United States Congress for this honor. From the bottom of our hearts, we would like to thank you again for this award you have bestowed upon our father. My snappy salute to all.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Sampulna, for your inspiring message. And that concludes our virtual tribute to all Filipino heroes. This has been Felice Lois Lania, and join us again on April 9, 2022 for the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the Araw ng Kagitingan. Thank you and stay safe, everyone.